Back off a bye for another episode of The Install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. Good to see you, Greg. Hope you didn't get any time off.
No, I don't get a bye, Buck. That doesn't work that way.
In fact, it sounds like your life has been quite busy as of late, but certainly we're happy to be back on the podcast and talking about a little NFL football.
Yeah, I guess the Titans, what is the Titans record there? 3-2?
3-2 by nature of a really nice David Long interception when last we talked.
Yeah, and I believe the Colts are what, 3-2-1?
3-2-1. Greg, it's the only matchup in the NFL this week with two teams with a winning record.
Wow, and it is just so it's obviously the best matchup of the weekend.
I would maybe contend that. I think some other people might as well, but it is an important one for both of these teams, given that they'll have that series between the Titans and the Colts knocked out after this game with a pretty long.
I know, which is a little weird on week 7 that's all done, you know.
Well, the Colts schedule, Greg, I don't know if you've looked at it, but they have one more AFC South game after this. They'll have played 5 by the time we wrap this thing up. It's pretty weird this year.
So they only have one more for the whole rest of the season?
Yeah, it's not until I believe their finale is Houston in week 18, which the Titans play the Jags.
Wow. So they must have some tough games coming up.
Yeah, well, they've been slugging it out here for a little while, and even with an offense that has struggled, it seems like they found a little momentum, a little bit of better pass protection. It seems with an in-game change at left tackle from the rookie Bernard Raymond to a familiar face around here, Dennis Kelly. It seemed like it's settled.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I watched that tape, and I thought that the Colts offense, the pass game, of course, Matt Ryan dropped back a ton, and I don't know if we know about Jonathan Taylor or Naheem Hines yet for this week, but I did watch the Colts O versus the Jaguars D, and yeah, the pass protection was better. Kelly played left tackle. They moved Matt Pryor to right guard, which is probably a good move because Pryor is not really a tackle. And they tried Raymond. We saw him on Thursday night against the Broncos. He struggled mightily. Mm-hmm. And then after, I guess, 11 snaps this week, that experiment ended for now. Obviously, it was a fairly high pick, so they'll try that again at some point. But I thought their pass game was better. The interesting thing is Matt Ryan through 6 games is the second most blitz quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
And he's been sacked 9 times on blitzes, which is the second most in the league behind Fields. So, you can blitz him. Against the Jaguars, though, he was really, really good versus blitz. So that's just something to keep in mind as we look ahead to the game against the Titans.
Yeah, it felt like they were the protection, as you mentioned, was just doing a better job generally picking things up.
Yep.
On third down in particular, Greg, the Colts offense, it'd be tough to repeat the kind of execution that they had against the Jags on third down week over week, but certainly it's as good as they've looked so far through the season. And that 3rd and 1 call to go for the go-ahead touchdown, I really, really like from Frank Reich.
You're talking about the touchdown pass?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Brian was outstanding on third down. You're 100% right. He was 11 for 14 for 135 and 2 TDs. Brian was really, really good on third down. The offense was really, really good on third down. And, obviously the 32-yard game-winning touchdown to Pierce, that came versus pressure, and it was third down. So, it was a game where we saw their 3 receivers who were all big in Pittman, Pierce, and Campbell all make some plays. And we have now seen Jelani Woods become a pretty important piece to this offense, not only in the red zone, but just as a player who plays. And he's obviously a big factor in the red zone with his size and his hands, and caught another red zone touchdown in this past game against the Jaguars on a fade. And you could see the size. I mean, he's a big dude. So this is an offense that perhaps could be coming together a little bit. And I guess we don't know yet about Jonathan Taylor for this week, but when they do get him back, if the O-line can continue to hold up, and I made the note, just as you said, the Jags 4-man D-line pass rush was not a factor versus the Colts O-line.
As we on the subject of Jonathan Taylor, I've got the injury report from today. He was limited in practice, as was Shaq Leonard. Obviously 2 important players for this team in a couple of different facets. But yes, it was I think, you mentioned the skill position players for Indy, Greg. It feels like, they've had these Pierce is obviously a rookie, but Campbell has been there for a while, hasn't necessarily manifested in the way that they might have thought initially, but it seems like that's all. It's cool to kind of see that take shape from a game to game situation rather than take, the sample size of the games that they've already played and make any final determinations about teams the way that I think a lot of us can fall into that trap easily.
Yeah, we've played. I mean, the Titans have played 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
Colts have played 6. I think you can start to get a feel for teams. Obviously, look, I think the Titans, and we've discussed this. I don't think the Titans, there's a whole lot of mystery to what they want to be and how they want to play. I don't think that's going to dramatically change. Look, every team, when they get to the bye, what they do is they self-scout. And by that, I mean they look at their team and they see what they're doing well, what they're not doing well. They look to see how teams are playing what they do. Are teams playing what they do well? How are they playing it well if that's the case? They look, our teams taking away things. They try to scout so when they move forward, they have a better idea of what direction they need to go. But no team in a bye week would, I don't think, would make dramatic changes in philosophy.
No, the only thing I think anybody's looking for dramatic change around here is on the left side of the offensive line. That post Taylor Lewan, it has not been an easy situation for them to settle into. But the red zone offense is still operating at a high level. It's the best in the sport right now as far as efficiency.
And that's the critical piece because, as we know, this is not an offense that produces a ton of big plays. So when they do get down there, and obviously they're running the ball now with more volume with Henry. I think he had 28 carries in the last game, if memory serves me correctly. And we saw last year before he got hurt that 28 carry number is not an aberration when it comes to Derrick Henry. And I think that they would like to see that number or close to that number be pretty much the norm.
Yeah, no, I mean Earl Campbell's going to be in the house. They've got the Oilers and Titans, alumni
Oh,
weekend this weekend. So I think Derek's going to get plenty of work, and if for nothing else, because that's what Derek does, not just because Earl's in the house and they that's the kind of team that they've been for forever as far as volume carry for impressive running backs are concerned. Looking at a game though from this past weekend, Greg, the Bills and the Chiefs, obviously a big matchup in the AFC. A much different kind of game than we saw in the divisional round when these two teams played, but still a really exciting one, I thought.
Yeah, it was interesting because after the first couple of series, I guess the Bills went down and had the turnover. The Chiefs went down and Mahomes threw the end zone interception to Ka'ir Elam. And, both drives were long, and all of a sudden it seemed like the first quarter was over and there's no score. And everybody who said 38-35, like we all did, figured, well, is this going to be a 13-10 game?
Yeah.
And but it's funny. I thought the offenses, for the most part, played pretty well. I mean, obviously there were some defensive things that really played out nicely. I thought what the Bills chose to do on third down was fascinating because what they essentially did was use Matt Milano as a spy on Patrick Mahomes, because Mahomes is a mover. Mahomes has almost reached the point where he seemingly moves out of habit. Sometimes he doesn't even need to move, but he's so good doing so that he still makes a ton of plays. He's the best trick shot artist in the league. He can make throws from every angle possible and does so. But I thought with what the Bills did, and most of the time when Milano was the spy, which was almost every third down and reasonable length of distance for first down, they played man coverage behind it. Now they play 2-man, which is a much safer form of man than cover one with a single high safety. Because the reality is a single high safety, if you're going to throw the ball essentially outside the hash or outside the numbers, it can be difficult for a single high safety to truly be a factor.
Right.
But if you're playing 2-man, you've got 2 deep safeties and they can be factors. So what that does, Buck, is that allows the underneath man defenders to play differently because they truly have a safety over the top.
In the way that we've talked about Leslie Frazier, the Bills defensive coordinator, before on this podcast. He's obviously a known commodity in the
and
coaching
he's
world,
very
in
good
the
for a
NFL
long
world.
time. Yeah.
But I thought the game plan that, as you mentioned, the way that they played Patrick Mahomes and the impact of Von Miller, I thought was very evident in affecting the game. It was a lot of fun to watch them play like I said, a different style of game than we all thought it might have been. but one that was really, really competitive throughout the course of that. And I thought Leslie Frazier made Patrick Mahomes' life as hard as anybody has in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think going in, we probably all thought, given who the Bills would be playing in the secondary, starting a rookie Elam, playing another rookie Bedford, meaningful, significant snaps. Dane Jackson is a young player as well. They had to start a second-year safety, Demir Hamlin from the University of Pittsburgh. I think the feeling was that Mahomes would eat that up. And it didn't play out that way. I mean, Mahomes made some plays, but they didn't eat up that secondary at all. And the Bills did not blitz much at all. But they did play man, as I said, but a lot of two-man. And, they're just really fundamentally efficient in the way in which they play. They don't give up a lot. There's no easy yards against the Bills defense. Look, even the touchdown to Smith-Schuster was a Mahomes special, moving around, then finding Smith-Schuster. I mean, that's tough to cover when the quarterback has the ball for 7, 8, 9 seconds. You can't really say, boy, terrible Bills defense. That's a tough deal. But yeah, they do not give up easy yards.
So I took a swing at some games that might be on the matchup show this weekend. Greg, is Falcons and Bengals going to make the show?
Falcons Bengals is going to make the show.
Well, and I was curious about that because I was looking at some of the numbers on the Falcons offense right now, Greg, since we're talking about offensive efficiency, what they've been able to do with, a couple of familiar faces that we know down here in Nashville, Marcus Mariota and Arthur Smith. The offense has been really efficient on third down in particular. They're a top 5 efficiency offense in football right now. How much have you had the opportunity to watch, I guess, the Falcons?
I've seen them quite a bit.
What have you made of them?
They're an odd team to watch, given those numbers. Because look, I think Marcus Mariota this week wasn't he the NFC Player of the Week?
He absolutely was.
Now, when was the last time a quarterback was the NFC Player of the Week when he threw 14 balls?
Oh, it's.
That's just a rhetorical question. I didn't expect you to answer that because I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I mean, think about that in today's NFL. When would a quarterback be the Player of the Week throwing 14 balls?
The only other place I could imagine would be in Tennessee because of the way.
Yeah. So their offense it's an interesting watch because their run game. I mean, Patterson, when he was playing, had some big days, a couple of big games, but this week was an odd game. They sustained offense, but they didn't really have big plays in the run game. But what they do get is they seemingly always get 3 or 4 yards. I mean, they were 9 for 14 on third down, which plays into efficiency, but 9 of those 14 third downs, Buck, were 3 yards or less. So that's the fascinating thing because it seems like they run on first down, they get 3 yards. They run on second down, they get 4 yards. All of a sudden, it's 3rd and 3, but you didn't feel like that 3-yard run and 4-yard run didn't look like anything. You know what I mean? It's not like, wow, they really run.
Greg, you're describing my entire professional career watching the football team down the street, basically. That's what I felt like the last couple of years.
Yeah, but Henry gets more, Henry's the kind of back that when it's blocked for 3, he gets 7, and then all of a sudden it's 2nd and 3.
Conceptually, though, I'm familiar.
Right. But, and then Mariota, in some ways, it's like the Eagles, where I'm up in the Philadelphia area.
Sure.
When the quarterback gives you the zone read dimension almost every play when he's in the gun and a back is offset, that presents some issues for the defense. And I think that's one of the things that has really helped them because they don't necessarily put up big passing numbers. As I said, Patterson had some big rushing games. Mariota's always a threat running the ball, both by design and second reaction, and that changes the way defenses play. See, that's the way defenses think about it. They're not thinking about it maybe the way fans are in the sense, they're not putting up big numbers. Mariota is not throwing for, 350 yards. They're not rushing for 200 yards every week. That's not the way defensive coordinators who have to play them think about it. They think about what do we have to defend and how difficult is it to defend? How do we have to allocate our bodies and our resources to defend this? And does that leave us vulnerable in other ways? And very often it does. So, they're a fascinating team because those numbers don't reflect, don't reflect the individual numbers of the players. That would be the better way to say it.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that'll be the task for the Bengals defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo
And I
this
think
week.
they're without Logan Wilson. If from what I read this week, I think he's hurt, and I think the feeling is they're saying day to day, but I saw something where the feeling is it might be a 2 to 3 week injury.
That'll obviously play an impact. What from this game itself, though, Greg? What kind of matchups are you looking at this week on the show?
Well, I'm going to do a piece actually on Mariota. We do the Bengals a lot, and it's funny. People obviously on social media, if we don't show a team, how could you not show this to and we get that a lot. But the one thing on the show, just so people understand, is we don't want to do the same teams every single week from a film standpoint. And the assumption is, I'm not saying Atlanta will not be a good team. We have no idea. But Cincinnati was a Super Bowl team last year. The percentage wise, we tend to think that Cincinnati will right the ship and probably be a team that as we go down the stretch, will have to do a decent amount. And
Right.
we just don't want to do the same teams in a film segment every single week.
Especially in the middle of October.
Correct. Look, I got a chance to actually interview Arthur Smith a year or so ago because I did the Falcons preview film, and I wish nothing but good things. I hope they continue to play great ball. But I think most people would probably say the likelihood of Cincinnati being there more down the stretch might be greater than Atlanta. Who knows? But that's just a philosophy we have with the show. We don't want to do the same teams and the same players. It's like Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense when they're humming, or now Josh Allen and the Bills. You don't want to do the same quarterback and the same, because you know what? We do concepts. We don't just do plays, as you know. We don't just say, here's Travis Kelce, he's great. We don't do that. And we don't want to end up doing the same concepts in the pass game every single week.
Right. I think that's important for people to remember. And of course, you know this if you're watching the NFL matchup show. And if you're not, what are you doing? DVR it right now. Get to it on ESPN Plus on demand. And you will see the kind of breakdowns that Greg will do on Marcus Mariota and whatever Darius Butler has prepared for this week, whether it's Sal Pal or Dan Graziano. It's always a great
time. It's going to be this week. It'll be Field Yates. Sal Pal will be back after this week.
Okay, excellent. And Field is so good at what he does. He's always somebody who I think football fans enjoy hearing from. Chiefs Niners, a Super Bowl rematch from a couple of years ago, Greg. This is obviously we've talked about the Chiefs component of things, but San Francisco, the defense, it's so difficult to evaluate a team when they're dealing with the kind of injuries that it looks like San Francisco has been dealing with up front. It's a totally different kind of defense. We know what they are. When they're healthy, they're overwhelming.
Well, it's funny you say that because this is a perfect example again of what I just said with the matchup show. Because of the Chiefs, so what I did this week, and I did the piece on the 49er run game, because last week the 49ers got out of whack. It was just one of those games. They had 42 dropbacks by Garoppolo and 13 runs by running backs. So that's not the way they want to play. And there's no way Kyle Shanahan's going to go into this game saying, hey, we're gonna get into a shootout and we want Jimmy G dropping back 45 times. He's not going to play that way, because that's not the way they play at their best. So I did a piece on the 49er run game because they're ultimately going to want to run the ball, obviously be super efficient doing so. We'll see if that happens. Obviously what they're looking for is high volume and high production. But they're going to want to shorten the game. They're going to want to control the tempo of the game and let their run game be the driving force. And then Jimmy G will throw. When the Niners are playing what I would call, I guess, Niners football, is Jimmy G would probably throw 25 balls. He's not he's not going to throw 40. And last week he threw over 40. And he didn't play poorly, by the way, because there were a couple of really bad drops. But the point is that's not the way they want to play. So I did a piece basically making the point that, hey, this is how they're going to play, and this is what they're going to have to do in order for them to win this game.
It's going to be a fun one to watch, I think, and kind of to your point about Garoppolo and I think people would assume, because you see the win-loss result. If you're not watching every snap of Jimmy G coming into that week, you have certain predispositions about Jimmy G, the same way that we talked about with Carson Wentz. And it totally does the player a disservice, because you're right. There were drops that did, cost him, not just statistically, but in terms of the game itself. And I thought that was one of the, given the circumstances and given that they were clearly out of the style that they wanted to play, I thought that Jimmy, as you mentioned, managed it really well.
Yeah. I mean, he did not play poorly. But we'll see. Another team, I'm looking at this week, and because you have to, are the Giants. And by the way,
Yes.
the reason I mentioned that is you just used the word perception, and Daniel Jones has a certain perception as well, which is not the way he's playing this year. He's
Hell
actually
no.
playing very well on third down. Now, they don't score a ton of points because the O-line is still a work in progress. It's better, but it's still a work in progress. And he's playing with, kind of a patched together group of receivers. But he's actually playing well. And he's converting third downs in critical situations. Now, look, Brian Dable knows what he has.
Right.
Barkley is their driving force. Jones is not being asked in a game that is together. He's not going to be asked to drop back 40 times either. But Jones has been efficient. He's converting third downs. This past week, he made a bunch of big third down throws in the second half. So they're playing the way they have to play, given what they can put out there. And Wink Martindale, who you're familiar with, he's their D coordinator now, and he's one of the best in the league. He's been doing this a long time, and he had a really good approach versus Lamar Jackson. It'll be a totally different approach versus the Jags because the quarterbacks are totally different. But, he's a veteran DC who knows how to prepare for specific opponents.
And I think, I'm glad that you brought up the Daniel Jones component of it, Greg, because obviously, the Jags and the Titans division are always worth discussing. And the Giants at 5-1, to their credit, it's been really cool to kind of see how Brian Daboll and that offensive coaching staff have put Daniel Jones in positions to succeed. And beyond that, how he's executed when he has when he has a look that he is comfortable with.
Yeah.
He can just go out there and play.
Yeah. And look, in some ways, after 4 years, we don't know exactly what Daniel Jones is. I remember being in Nashville. He was in the draft when the draft was in Nashville, and the station brought me down, which was a wonderful experience. Hopefully that can happen again at some point.
We may have the Super Bowl in a couple of years if this new stadium goes through, Greg. You may find yourself in Nashville.
Yeah. But the point is, Daniel Jones was a 6th pick in the draft. Whether that was a consensus 6th pick, it doesn't matter, but he was considered a good prospect. And obviously he's had ups and downs through his first, 3 years, but, he's got some talent. No one's suggesting he's Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, but if you surround him with people, he can be, I believe, an efficient ball distributor and executor of an offense. And we'll see what happens the rest of the way.
And that's exactly what they're doing at this point, which is all that they can ask from him. The Jags, Greg, it's to watch their offense on a week-to-week basis. They got a couple of chunk plays in the early going against the Indianapolis Colts. Trevor Lawrence, I think at times it's easy to forget because you get caught up in how they start, or at least from my perspective, till you go back and watch through, you get caught up in how they started. And then you see, okay, he's clearly and obviously still got some growing pains that you're watching him work through in real time.
And I think after the poor game he had a week ago, Doug Peterson did a really smart thing. They tried to get him being efficient. They weren't worrying about big plays or chunks. They wanted him to be efficient, and he was. I mean, obviously they didn't score a ton of points,
right?
And they lost. But he's a clear work in progress. He's in a new system now. Everybody's kind of a work in progress because they have a lot of new players, skill players as well. So, he was 20 for 22, not for a lot of yards. It's baby steps. We've discussed this before, Buck, about Trevor Lawrence, because of all the hype coming out of high school, the #1 prospect in the country, #1 recruit, what he did at Clemson as a freshman, winning a national championship. People have already built statues for Trevor Lawrence,
sure.
And it doesn't quite work that way. And it's not the kid's fault at all, but he's a work in progress. And we've discussed the reasons why. We don't need to rehash that. And I've even spoken to coaches who will say the same thing, that he's a work in progress. And, fans hear that and they get mad at the person saying it because of what his, track record is and what his pedigree is. But it's going to take some time. And there's a lot in Doug Peterson's offense, by the way, that takes time to learn.
And I thought to your point about what Doug Peterson and the offensive coaching staff were looking to do, it did put them in a position to win the game. It took a touchdown at the end by Matt Ryan for them to go out and beat the Jags that way. And I thought that, given the circumstance in the week prior, as you mentioned, that looked like the most successful
Yeah.
version of it.
I mean, they
And
did put up 27 points. I was actually thinking the week before when I said they didn't put up many points. It was the week before against Houston when he really had the poor game. And like I said, this week he was efficient. That's, you have to be efficient before you can be really good. You don't just come in and be, oh my God, you're making big play after big play. It rarely works like that in the NFL.
I just asked Carson Wentz, Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, so many other quarterbacks with pedigree that have come in as high round draft picks and, needed to find their own footing throughout the course of their NFL careers.
Look at Josh Allen, okay? And we didn't discuss him regarding that game, but he was special in that game at good part of the game. Number one, when he was drafted and the Bills traded up for him, you probably recall there were a lot of people who said the Bills were idiots because this kid is scattershot. He's a wild stallion. He doesn't have a good head for the game. A lot of things were said about him. And through a year and a half, it seemed as if a lot of that made sense. And then beginning the second half of his second year, he sort of started the gradual ascent. And now he's Josh Allen. And, which makes the whole process of quarterback evaluation actually even more difficult because I do a lot of that, as you know. And you wonder if you see a guy play in college and he has clear flaws or weaknesses, even Jalen Hurts, okay? Jalen Hurts playing good football for the Eagles right now. As you know, you're an SEC country. Jalen Hurts was benched at Alabama because he couldn't throw.
Absolutely.
That's the reason he was benched. And now he's the quarterback of a 6-0 team, throwing the ball pretty well. He's not Josh Allen. He's not Patrick Mahomes, but he's throwing the ball really well. And their offense is clicking. So if you see a kid who's in college and you can't just automatically say, oh, this kid stinks, he can't throw, you dismiss him.
Yeah.
I'll give you a great example. And then, the kid who played for Bryce Young, Milroe.
Jalen Melrose.
As you probably know, big time recruit from the suburbs of Houston. I believe Katy, Texas, if memory serves me correctly. He came in and played that game. They ended up beating Texas A&M. Right now, he's not a particularly refined thrower of the football at all.
Right. Phenomenal
athlete, ridiculous athlete, but not a refined thrower of the football. So are we going to sit here and say right now, oh, this kid, he'll never play in the NFL. He's not a great thrower. You can't say that. We don't know that.
Yeah. No, I think, and it's so, people get caught up in their own perception, so much perception around things that are not actually taking place. And, honestly, Greg, I got caught up in the middle of college quarterback discussion because we had an incredible game here this weekend. Just a little Easter this weekend.
Great game.
Incredible quarterback game this weekend. Yeah. For whatever I'm not getting it with explosive plays on Sunday, I certainly got my fill on Saturday night.
And Buck, isn't it crazy that how the whole conversation would be different just based on a foot? If Reichard makes that field goal, it doesn't change really anything about the game at all in many ways, but Alabama would have won the game.
Yeah.
And therefore we'd be talking about it totally differently.
I think that's why it was so much fun, because it literally could have gone either way on two separate field goal tries.
Yeah, I mean, unbelievable. And the winning kick,
just barely.
Yeah, I mean, God. But no, that was a great football game. Great football game.
A lot of Vols fans with PTSD in this part of the country, Greg, who still think that kick is going to be blocked, even though we're 4 days removed from the game itself. Greg Cosell, always a pleasure. NFL Matchup Show. Set your DVRs. Catch it early on Saturday mornings. ESPN Plus, it's available on demand. Greg, it's always a pleasure to spend some time with you, and enjoy Week 7.
Thanks, Buck. Appreciate it.